Hi there, welcome to China Now. I am Makiza Latifa. Let's get started with China Currents with Lisa, who will present to you your weekly news report of what's trending in China. This week's episode will begin with news of another busted foreign spy in China following a major espionage case involving the British Secret Intelligence Service, M16. Also coming up in today's edition of the show is news on the Shangri-La Dialogue, which was held in Singapore, and then the Pakistani Prime Minister's visit on June 4th. Stay with Lisa for details of this and many more.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started.
Hello from Shanghai, this is Lisa. Welcome to another episode of China Currents, your weekly news report of what's trending in China. Let's start this episode with another foreign spy busted in China. On May the 3rd, Ministry of State Security, the Chinese Anti-Espionage Authority, disclosed a major espionage case involving the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, recruiting a couple from a central state agency. So the story begins with a couple, Wang and Zhou. In 2015, Wang applied to participate in a China-UK exchange program to study in the UK. MI6, valuing his position in a core confidential role, quickly facilitated approval of his application. Upon Wang's arrival in the UK, MI6 arranged for personnel to provide him with special attention, including dining invitations and sightseeing tours, to understand his personality, weaknesses, and hobbies. After discovering Wang's strong desire for money, MI6 personnel posing as alumni befriended him on campus and offered him a part-time consulting opportunity with high compensation. Tempted by financial incentives, Wang agreed to engage in paid consulting. Initially, the British side used public research projects as a pretext, gradually involving Wang in core matters of the central state agency, with payment significantly higher than normal consulting fees. Although Wang became suspicious, he continued to provide consulting services under the lure of substantial money. After some time, the British side assessed the situation as mature and introduced MI6 personnel to Wang, revealing their identities and requesting his services for the British government, promising higher payment and security guarantees. Seeking personal gain, Wang agreed to the British demands and completed the espionage procedures. MI6 provided spy training for Wang and instructed him to return to China to gather important intelligence. Wang's wife, Zhou, also worked in a critical department. MI6, confident in their control over Wang, repeatedly pressured him to recruit his wife, promising double compensation. Despite initial hesitation, Wang succumbed to persistent persuasion, inducement, and even threats from the British side, eventually convincing Zhou to agree to gather intelligence for them. Thus, Wang and his wife both became spies for the British side. With a thorough investigation and solid evidence, the Chinese National Security Agency decisively took action, legally detaining and interrogating Wang and Zhou, thereby uncovering a significant MI6 operative within China's internal system. The case is currently under further investigation. Next up, space. According to Chinese state media, on the 2nd of June, China has successfully landed its second spacecraft, the Chang'e 6 unmanned probe, on the moon's far side. The feat marks a key milestone in achieving its mission to bring home, for the first time in human history, samples from an unexplored region from Earth's natural satellite, as stargazers around the world hold their breath for this epic moment. According to the China National Space Administration, the lander-ascender combination of the Chang'e 6 probe after traveling in orbit for some 30 days since its May 3rd launch, touched down at the designated landing area at 6:22 a.m. in Beijing time in the South Pole Aitken Basin. The next day, after being powered by the 3,000 Newton engine for approximately 6 minutes, the ascender of Chang'e 6, which carries valuable rocks and dust collected from the far side of Moon, took off from the lunar surface and entered its preset lunar orbit with success. What's worth noting is that during the sampling and storage process, Chinese researchers in ground laboratories simulated the sampling area's geographic model based on data sent back to China's Queqiao-2 relay satellite. This simulation provided critical support for decision-making and the operation of various stages of the sampling process. Next up, on the 4th of June, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif kicked off his visit to China, which marks his first China visit since he started his second term as Prime Minister in March. Chinese expert from state media said this high-level visit will further enhance ties between China and Pakistan, push forward the development and upgrade the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and expand cooperation in emerging sectors such as new technologies. They also believe that while security issues along the sea peg still remain a challenge, Sharif's visit will elevate the mutual trust and push for new cooperation between two countries to inject strong momentum into the CPEC. We're coming with serious plans to make our friendship become much higher than the Himalayas and deeper than the deepest ocean of the world, Sharif said in an interview with Chinese media in Islamabad ahead of his China trip. Next up, drones. On 5th of June, DJI, the world's leading manufacturer of civilian drones, announced that it had successfully completed a high-altitude transportation test with drones on the south slope of Mount Everest. This marks the first time a civilian drone has completed a round trip on the route at altitudes between 5,300 meters and 6,000 meters, setting a new record for civilian drone transportation. Between the 25th of April and the 1st of May 2024, DJI's payload drone team conducted a week-long high-altitude flight and transportation capability test in the Mount Everest South Base Camp and above, verifying the drone's adaptability to high-altitude flight, empty flight, and loaded flight. The results demonstrated that the unmodified DJI Flycart 30 can stably fly at around 6,000 meters in temperatures of -5 degrees Celsius and wind speeds of 15 meters per second with a payload capacity of 15 kilograms. In a transportation mission carrying 15 kilograms over a route length of 2.6 kilometers and climbing a height of 700 meters, the Flycart 30 had 43% battery power remaining after one round trip, and the power system still had over 20% power margin under extreme climbing conditions, demonstrating stable power system performance and further room for altitude improvement. This is also the first time a drone has been used for transportation under natural conditions at an altitude of 6,000 meters and in real mountain conditions. It is worth noting that the FC-30 was optimized for various extreme scenarios during the product design phase. In the recently concluded 40th Antarctic Expedition of China, the FC-30 also passed the test of the harsh Antarctic climate and harsh environment on drone flight performance. It demonstrated stable flight capabilities and reliability, significantly improving the efficiency and flexibility of scientific research work. Before the measurement in the Mount Everest area, the extreme bottom line verification for an altitude of 6,000 meters was also carried out in Xizang. Next up, let's take a look at Chinese chip. Imagine you are sitting in a cozy room, your mind drifting peacefully. Your brain hums along in a state of tranquil response, neurons firing at a gentle, measured pace, expending minimal energy as it maintains the basic functions of your body. It's as if your mind has settled into a restful slumber, conserving its power for when it's truly needed. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes from the next room, jolting you from your meditation. Your ears perk up, frantically relaying the unexpected sound to your brain. In an instant, a surge of electricity sweeps through your neuron pathways, as if someone has flipped a switch. The neurons responsible for processing the auditory input spring into action and firing rates spiking rapidly. Your brain's computational resources quickly reallocate, directing your full attention towards the source of the disturbance. Blood flow increases, metabolism ramps up, and your mind becomes laser-focused, ready to investigate and respond to this silent new stimulus. The transition is seamless and lightning fast, occurring in mere fractions of a second. With remarkable agility, your brain has shifted from a low-power resting state to a heightened state of activity, dynamically marshalling its resources to address the pressing matter at hand. Rather than wasting energy on irrelevant information, your mind has sufficiently focused on what demands its immediate attention, exemplifying the remarkable adaptive capability of the human brain. The brain's remarkable ability to dynamically allocate resources based on demand is the envy of most of the current AI systems, which continuously consume power, even in idle state. To emulate the energy efficiency of the brain, researchers from the Institute of Automation of Chinese Academy of Science have unveiled a groundbreaking neuromorphic chip called SPEC, which promises to revolutionize machine intelligence by mimicking the dynamic computing capability of the human brain. The chip, designed through a collaborative algorithm software-hardware design, can achieve energy-efficient, spike-based computing, offering significant advantages over traditional AI systems. They published the result on the journal Nature Communications. Neuromorphic computing, inspired by the human brain, has long been hailed as a potential solution to overcome the resource and energy constraints faced by traditional AI methods. The human brain operates on just 20 watts of energy while running complex neural networks. By abstracting brain computations into neuron and synapses, previous neuromorphic platforms have demonstrated impressive energy efficiency using spike-based communication and computing. However, researchers have questioned whether the current level of abstraction in neuromorphic systems truly emulate the brain's efficient computation. This leads to the development of SPEC, a sensing computing neuromorphic chip that introduced an innovative approach to dynamic computing. One of the key advantages of SPEC is its ability to enter a low-power resting state when no input is present. This feature closely resembles the brain's ability to dynamically allocate resources based on demand. Just as the brain conserves energy when not actively processing information, SPEC mimics power consumption when it does not receive any input. The chip achieved this by employing an asynchronous design. Unlike traditional AI systems, SPEC remains in a low-power resting state until it receives input. The design eliminates unnecessary power consumption, making it high energy efficient. When an input is detected, the chip swiftly transitions from its resting state to an active state. To handle input, SPEC integrates the dynamic vision sensors, which serves as the eye of the chip. The DVS is an asynchronous sensor that generates binary spikes when changes occur in the visual sensor's brightness. Unlike traditional cameras that capture frames at fixed intervals, the DVS only generates spikes when there is a change in the scene, reducing redundancy and conserving energy. When a DVS detects a change in brightness, it asynchronously and sparsely generates a stream of events in the form of binary spikes with associated addresses. These spikes represent the visual information and serve as input into the neuromorphic chip. Upon receiving these spikes, SPEC's processor activates and leverages its hardware circuits designed to perform distributed convolution processing of the spikes tray. Remarkably, SPEC exhibit ultra-low latency, processing a single spike with a latency of only 3.36 microseconds. This rapid response time enables real-time computing and makes SPEC ideal for applications that require quick and accurate processing, such as mobile devices and the Internet of Things. By combining the low-power resting state capability with the asynchronous event-driven process facilitated by the DVS, SPEC achieves remarkable energy efficiency and dynamic computing capabilities. The chip's ability to adapt its computational resources based on input demand, just like the brain, opens up new possibilities for efficient and intelligent machine learning applications. The breakthrough represented by SPEC holds great promise for the future of machine intelligence. Its dynamic and energy-efficient computing capability paves the way for more efficient AI systems, addressing resources and energy constraints, and unlocking new frontiers in edge computing applications. As researchers continue to refine and expand upon this technology, the potential for neuromorphic computing to reshape the AI landscape and power advanced applications becomes increasingly tangible. And that is all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Current. If you have any thoughts or comments about our show, please reach us at the email address below. I'm Lisa. Look forward to hearing from you, and see you next time.
And it's a wrap on China Currents. Thank you, Lisa. Let's now turn our attention to the Thinkers Forum, the segment where we engage our scholars and thinkers on very critical issues and, most importantly, the relations between China and the rest of the world. Jin Canrong is a professor of international relations at Renmin University, and he is our first guest for the first phase of the segment.
In the past 3 days, you may know in Singapore, there is a so-called Shangri-La Forum. And many people noticed the first day of this year's forum, in the May 31st, the two ministers, defense ministers, met together, right? One is Defense Minister Austin from US, and another is Mr. Dong Jun from China. I think the media pay a lot of attention to this high-ranking meeting. And many people noticed during the dialogue between these two defense ministers, Taiwan issue is a very hot issue, very prominent issue. Mr. Dong Jun from Chinese side made it very clear, Taiwan is the real red line of China. Taiwan separatists and some people from outside the world, if they want to play the card of Taiwan, they got counterback from China. In recent months, people who pay attention to Taiwan issue should notice that this issue become hot again. And the very important reason is that Mr. Lai Ching-te, he delivered inaugural speech, right, in May 20th. In that speech, his position is very provocative to mainland China. He stressed on his point is that Taiwan and mainland China separated. Taiwan is a sovereignty. That's go beyond the bottom line of Beijing. That provocative gesture made Beijing very angry. You see some measure taken by Beijing. One is military exercise surrounding Taiwan. Another is some economic punishment and medium critics. And under this background, Lai Ching-te not step back. He's still very tough. And behind him, some US politicians give him a support. So that makes the situation around Taiwan really dangerous. As you may know, Taiwan is part of China, and it traces back to many years ago. If you're interested in Chinese culture, you should know the story of three kingdoms. Right? In Chinese, we call it the 三国演义, the game of three kingdoms. And one of the kingdom is so-called Dongwu, and the leader of Dongwu, called Sun Quan, at that time, he sent his general ship to Taiwan and claimed the sovereignty of Taiwan. So this claim of sovereignty can trace back to nearly 2,000 years ago. But in modern history, because Qing dynasty defeated by Japan Empire in 1894, so-called 甲午战争, the war occurred in 甲午year. So Taiwan separated 50 years to Japan Empire. But after the end of Second World War, Taiwan back to China. The later time of the Second World War, there is a so-called Cairo Declaration signed by three leaders of the world at that time. One is Franklin Roosevelt, the President of the United States, and Winston Churchill of Great Britain, and Mr. Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Republic of China at that time. According to Declaration of Cairo, the Cairo Declaration, the Japan Empire must retain all the territory they seized from China. So that's the very important document with international law impacts. And 2 years later, in the famous Boston Protocol, fully 100% accept the stance of Cairo Declaration. That means the Boston Protocol ordered or required the Japanese empire to retain all the territory, including Taiwan, back to China. And as you may know, in the August 15th, 1945, the emperor of Japan Empire at that time, they fully accept the requirements of Boston Protocol, right? So from the perspective of international law, Taiwan back to China in 1945. Later on, Taiwan separated with mainland China, not because the invasion of other country, not because of the impact of international law, but because civil war. You may know, between 1946 to 1949, in China, we have a very tragic situation. At that time, the two major parties, one is the Communist Party of China, one is Nationalist Party of China. They fight each other. We fell into a civil war. And the result of this civil war is that Kuomintang, the so-called Nationalist Party of China, they fled to Taiwan. Then leads to the separation of Taiwan with mainland China until today, right? So basically speaking, now Taiwan and mainland China separated for a while because civil war is a result of civil war. And both sides, during when Kuomintang ran in Taiwan, both sides declared they represent the whole China. But in recent years, when DPP, Democratic Progressive Party of Taiwan, came into power, they changed the attitude. They changed their political position. They tend to legally separate Taiwan from whole China. That's something not acceptable from Beijing's perspective. So that's why in recent years, the relations across Taiwan Strait become very unstable. But up to date, the leaders in Beijing, their position looks like this. China will be unified, but Beijing side put peaceful unification on the very top. Although mainland China owns obvious military advantage, Beijing now owns a choice of use of force to unify China. But up to date, the leaders in Beijing still put peaceful unification on the very top, right? So that's the main reason why although the cross-Taiwan Strait relations has problem, but the situation around Taiwan is still quite peaceful. But with very recent political change in Taipei, Lai Ching-te, who publicly claimed he is a Taiwan separatist. With Lai Ching-te, this Taiwan separatists came into power. Then the situation now facing some danger. And makes things worse is that although Taiwan issue basically is an internal issue of China, because as I mentioned, is a result of a civil war. But at the very beginning, the United States involved in China's civil war. You know, during the civil war, between 1946 to 1949, U.S. backed Kuomintang, backed the Nationalist Party of China, right? So to some extent, the U.S. involved in China's civil war. And after Kuomintang fled to Taiwan, the U.S. gave full support to Taiwan, including military support. So that makes the situation very complicated. Legally speaking, Taiwan issue is an issue of Chinese internal affairs. But because this historical reason, the U.S. is a party involved in this game. And on U.S. side, I think the quite high percentage of U.S. strategy want to play the card of Taiwan against mainland China. Although the U.S. side still promised to so-called one China policy. They give the cheap lip service every day. They said we were loyal to one China policy, but their behavior betrayed their promise. Their behavior is to encourage Taiwan to separate. So that makes the leaders in Beijing in a very awkward situation. As I mentioned, Beijing determined to unify the whole China. That's a promise to the whole nation. On any circumstances, Beijing will not give up this stance. We will unify the whole China. Now the new situation in Taiwan in U.S. forced Beijing authority to give more serious consideration of a non-peaceful unification. So that makes the situation looks much more dangerous than before. As all know, this year, 2024, is the general election year of United States, right? And compared to previous election, this year the partisan politics is really get worse, right? Democrats, Biden side, they legally sued the former president Donald Trump, and put Trump in a very dangerous situation. On the other side, the Republican side, quite a lot, the Republican supporters become more and more enthusiastic to support Donald Trump. So the split of partisan politics really get worse. Whether this election can end in a peaceful way, we don't know. As for the result, from Chinese perspective, there is no substantial differences between the two candidates. As for Taiwan, I think no substantial differences. Both of them will play the card of Taiwan. So both of them will lead to this result that they will force our leader in Beijing to make the decision in the near future. I personally believe within 5 years, there will be no Taiwan issue. We'll resolve that. Nobody can stop China. So because we will resolve Taiwan issue by use of force, that means there will be no one state, two system. No arrangement like Hong Kong. Just one state, one system. So that will be the result. So Taiwan people looks funny. They refuse the one state, two system arrangement, right? That means finally they can only face in one fate, one state, one system. I think that will be the future end.
And next on the Thinkers Forum is Haico Ebbers, a professor of international economics at the Nyenrode Business University.
If you look at big companies in China, they are here already for 20, 30 years. They invest a lot of money to build their presence here. And I don't believe that these big companies may leave China. Of course, there are, if you look at plans for expansion, maybe they are not reinvesting their profit in China, but they may do that in other parts of the world. That is possible. But I would not expect a big trend that companies are leaving China. Maybe small, medium-sized enterprises are doing that because they are a little bit more footloose than the big companies. However, if you look at the large companies, they are considering changes in the supply chain, in the global supply chain, because they foresee future tensions between China and the US, China and Europe, and they want to protect their supply chain to make sure that the supply chain is still working and is efficient. And for that, you see some developments. For example, they may make the statement that they produce where they are consuming the product. So if you look at the Chinese market, then many companies are also producing in China or producing nearby China to make sure that the market can be supplied with their product. So producing where the consumption is. Again, that can be China related, but it can also be Asian related. There's also a trend that they want an alternative for the bilateral components or the bilateral flow between the US and China, so that specific raw materials which are now exported from the US to the Chinese subsidiary or to the subsidiary in China, that you see that now they are using South Korea or Singapore with their investments to make sure that the raw materials can also be more or less supplied by these markets instead of from the US. So they are building up parallel supply chains. And you may refer to that as the China plus one strategy, that it is not only supply chains where you have dependence on China, but you also are looking for alternatives. It does not mean that you are leaving China, but there will be a sort of additional parallel supply chain than only the Chinese supply chain. And by the way, I think also for China, it is impossible or not very wise to decouple fully from the global supply chain. So the Chinese economy also needs part of the supply chain. So the big companies need China also in the future, and China needs also the big companies also in the future. And there are sensitivities clearly, but I don't foresee a sort of structural trend that China will be decoupled from global supply chains. Yes, clearly already in 2012, I think we had a lot of problems with in the West of the inflow of solar panels from China. And then the EU tried to increase tariffs, but because they were afraid for retaliation from China, they stopped the increase of tariffs. And therefore the solar panels were able to be exporting to the EU market. Now we have the same situation. We think we need to protect our domestic market from the enormous inflow of, for example, solar panels from China. And the world indeed is changing. Now we see a little bit more defensive, aggressive move that the US, but maybe also the EU, will continue with their statement and their investigation that there is unfair practice and that they will increase tariffs. So from that angle, you would expect there will be a sort of intense fight in the future on all kinds of products. However, I don't foresee that the fight is out of control in a sense, because we need each other. The world is so interconnected that it would be very strange and not very logical and very irrational to decouple. In general, you could say that Chinese companies going abroad, they are moving abroad due to the market mostly. And if you look at whether they are successful or not, there are some success factors to explain the success of Chinese companies abroad. And these are more or less the same type of success factors as what we see from Western companies moving or doing business in China. So you have to localize your product. You have to make sure that cultural differences may may have an impact on the way of doing business. You have to comply with the local rules. And also the head office is important. It is clear that if the head office is very centralized, but in the market itself you have to localize, there's a mismatch. And the mismatch in that type of companies create, in many cases, the failure. So we call that the governance structure should be aligned with the strategy you have in other markets. So that's the general idea on factors explaining success and failure. Now, one strategic choice, obviously, is how to enter foreign markets. And you may enter foreign markets just by an alliance or even via export, but you may also go to the market due to or with ownership, that you want to have full ownership and that you want to have management control what you are doing abroad. We call that a foreign direct investment. And we have two types of foreign direct investment. We have greenfield investments and we have M&As, mergers and acquisitions. So what you see in many cases is that the Chinese companies, when they are moving abroad, they mostly are using the M&A track because they want to have speed in their international expansion. You can imagine it is clear that an M&A is much faster. However, if you look at how a government reacts on that, a government would prefer a greenfield investment. Because if you look at a greenfield investment, that is a new investment, that's a new plant, that's new labor, that is increasing competition. While if a Chinese company is taking over a domestic company, it is more or less only change of ownership. There's not so much impact on the economy. We have the sensitivity that maybe all kind of negative spillover effects are happening. So Western companies are more and more eager to screen, to assess investments from China. We call that investment screening mechanism. That makes it difficult for Chinese companies to follow the M&A track. In general, if you believe that globalization has an issue in giving away autonomy, then as a nation state, you may have the attitude that you have to reduce more or less globalization and you have to reduce all the activities which are connected to the world. So in that sense, if you think that the hyper-globalized world may also create the issue of giving away too much sovereignty, you may block companies at the border or you may block exports via higher tariffs. So the general vision, the general view of the Western economies nowadays is that hyper-globalization means that we have to give too much autonomy and that the role of the nation state therefore is under attack. And that is why in general we see that we are emphasizing that certain strategic sectors where we think, where the West think that they are very important for the future competitiveness of a country, that these sectors should be protected and that we are not giving away the autonomy of these iconic companies and these strategic sectors. You see indeed with this investment screening mechanisms that we put more and more sectors inside the screening because again we believe that giving away too much autonomy would not be wise. But there's another side on this because I always hear from the Western point of view that if a Chinese company is taking over a high-tech company in the West, that we should block that because of the issue that maybe the knowledge will be transferred back to China. But I think that is a thinking mistake because in many cases Chinese companies are not looking for the knowledge today or the technical knowledge today, but they're also looking for the technological knowledge for the future. If they invest in a Dutch company, they will make sure that the Dutch company will develop because they are looking for, obviously, future knowledge. for myself, I don't have the feeling that we should be afraid that after takeover, the Dutch company will disappear or that the knowledge will disappear. The Chinese part will invest in that future technology, which also is important for the Netherlands in this case.
And here's where we part ways on today's edition of the show. My name is Makiza Latifa, and many thanks for choosing to stay with us. Please remember to share with us your comments, thoughts, feedback, and suggestions for the coming episodes of the show through the email provided below. See you same time next week.